Jerry Ting from Evisort, it's so good to see you here live at Legal Week. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
It's been a little while. We've been trying to kind of connect with each other. I'm glad that it's here. It's at the Hilton. We're in New York. Have you seen anything at all on the floor that's surprised you, impressed you, or is it just a little bit more of the same? You've been at this for a while, Jerry. What have you noticed?
I think this is my 8th Legal Week.
Yep.
And just going back to the first one, it was all e-discovery and a very law firm focus, as you remember. What surprised me this year is just the amount of people talking about AI and the number of people that actually don't do AI talking about AI. And I think that's an evolving trend, but every poster, even from software services providers talking about being an AI solution, it's interesting. It's just a sign of the times, I think.
Let's take this from the point of view of an entrepreneur, of a founder, which is what you are. Tell us a little bit about the origin story of Evisort.
Yeah. I was in law school. I didn't want to start a company. I wanted to practice law. And given the tools that were on the market at the time in 2016, most of these were software tools that were legacy that lawyers were using. And nothing actually solved the problem of what lawyers actually do for legal work, which is reviewing documents for key insights, for strategic decisions, and then managing these agreements after they're signed. And so we started Evisort in 2016, focused on AI from the very beginning, because we wanted to solve the work that lawyers actually do around the document versus around building more software. And that's been our mission ever since.
Tell me a little bit about what you mean strategic decisions, because you said that fast because you live in that world all day. Yeah. But for those that are not familiar with what that means, break that down like a fraction for me.
If you think about the role of a general counsel, or the role of a lawyer, actually, we go to law school because we want to give strategic advice. And what I mean by that is, should we incur this risk? What is that risk? How do we actually move forward on a deal if it's a deal lawyer without jeopardizing the commercials while also preserving the legal posture of the agreement? That's just, at a very high level. So that's the work that lawyers want to do. Instead, what they do is they sit there in archaic systems and they have to manually do a lot of the reading, the redlining, the version control, the herding of cats of all the other business stakeholders that go along such a process. And so that work lawyers usually don't want to do, but is a critical part of their job, and sometimes, unfortunately, the majority of their job.
And so you remove that burden from them.
We do. Yeah, so what Evisort does is we help you draft the contracts, help you automatically redline the agreements, and then once the contract is signed, we can actually tell you what's in the agreements without needing training. And so it's a system that can read that's AI-based.
So you're sitting there and you're in law school, and you realize you don't want to be a lawyer while you're in law school?
It was very depressing. Because I already signed up for the tuition bill, and I moved from California to Boston, and I went to Harvard for law school, so it was, from the outside looking in, people were very happy for me. But when I was actually thinking about what the actual work is, and I was talking to advisors and mentors, it was a lot of very repetitive work, right?
So where do you jump the fence onto the entrepreneurial business side? What was your dinner table like growing up? Where does this confidence come from? Where does this catalyst of an idea go like, I can do this? Like, was that home and the dinner table? You came from an entrepreneurial family, or like, where did that come from?
So my dad owns a small business.
There you go.
Right.
Okay.
So, he has 3 employees, right? But, Dad always said, if you can make a change, try to. It took a long time for that to come to effect, right? So I went to law school, was sitting there in the black letter law classes, and I just felt really frustrated with where law was then and now, to be honest. We work with hundreds and hundreds of some of the largest companies in the world today, right? Evisort's raised about $155 million of venture funding. But still, when I meet new organizations, it's very manual, it's very tedious, and the mental health of practitioners is very low because they're not doing what they want to do as a practitioner.
Yep.
They're doing the work that has to be done to get a deal done.
So we look upstairs, and there's 150 startups up there. They're not all going to make it.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have as a founder, an entrepreneur, someone who's been able to raise $150+ million in funding? What advice do you have to anyone who thinks that they can, sort of break through and break in here?
We should all work together.
I love that.
That's a funny thing, right? Because you think, hey, there's 10 companies here talking about contracts. Are they all competitors? Not really, actually. I'm friends with most of the CEOs of the enduring companies in the space, and a lot of times we're actually partners. And I think that's really interesting is that for some of the companies that didn't have AI before, they actually use Evisort to provide that AI because we're a partner with the customer. So if you focus on what the customer actually needs, whether it's a global international bank or it's a domestic healthcare organization, they may not want to buy several tools. Can we work together as partners to focus on the customer experience? And I would bring in consulting partners as well. Right? If you look at the consulting firms that are here, the other startups, a lot of us actually know each other. We work together, and so for the new folks that showed up, I invite them to reach out to me. There's a way where we can compete, but also partner, and there's a bit of nuance in that.
How does that conversation happen? When you first had those conversations and the advice that you have of, here's how you make that phone call. Because if you don't know how to make the call, you don't know how to make it.
Yeah.
What advice do you have of, here's how you make that call to introduce yourself?
Just make a friend. That's so simple. Right? I hug the CEOs of our competitors when I see them here because we all own businesses. We're all trying to do our best and hit our revenue goals and make payroll.
So you just say hello?
Just say hello. And then sometimes you find that you're the same customer. Can we actually connect the two systems and make it better together type of story versus everything is everything's a competition.
Yeah, I find that very encouraging. I say that all the time to people. I say, one of the things that I'm known for is to say, never eat alone.
Yeah.
Link in with somebody and say, can we have a virtual cup of coffee? I mean, it's really straightforward. Those that are open-minded will say yes. They'll have a virtual cup of coffee. And then there are people that are closed. And no matter what your pitch is, you can write a pitch that's, takes you 2 days to write it. They're not going to say yes. But people who say yes, say yes. So you can just say, listen, I really like what you're doing. Can we have a virtual cup of coffee? I'd like to exchange ideas on fill in the blank. And I think yes people are yes people.
Yeah, and I think it's an abundant mindset.
Yes.
Right. And for the companies that are here, and I've seen companies that were here 3 years ago that are not here now. Right. I've seen companies 5 years ago that are not here 3 years ago. It's just a cycle of how these companies work. And so for the companies that are enduring, usually they know the other companies. Right. This is an established space. This is, I think, the 2 decades of legal weeks. Right. And so,
Absolutely.
It's not all net new. AI might be new, but how you go to market, how you partner, how you service the customer, especially enterprise buyers, those sort of experiences matter.
I think the other thing that's really interesting about this space is the maturity of founders right now. So there's 20-somethings, there's 30-somethings, but then there's guys that have been around like this is their second or third or fourth turn of the wheel. They're 2-time, 3-time winners. I saw Greg Mazaris in the elevator a little while ago. I don't know if you know Greg or not, but Greg's now on his third startup round, as are a number of others that I won't name. Who do you admire in the space? If you want to sort of give a shout out and just drop some names to peers, colleagues, partners, who do you admire in the space right now?
This is going to date me a little bit, which is funny. But I remember when we started off on using AI to analyze signed contracts. That's the world that we started, and then we built CLM around that. And I remember the great companies of that time, which were CO Systems and Kira Systems.
Okay.
And luckily, right, the founder of CO.
Christina Wojciak, wasn't it?
Christina was a CO, yeah, she's great. And she was a client of ours at Citi as well.
Yep.
And then the founder of CO, Steve Tucker, now actually works with me and leads our sales organization. So that's how these things work, is that maybe at one time you're competing, at a different time you're going to work together, at another time they're going to be your consulting partner. The industry is really not that big. And so I would say when we walk around the hallways, I always look at the folks that are around us and try to say hi to them, even if they're not the CEO of the company. If they're somebody who's working the booth, not that long ago I was the one working the booth, and it's good just to walk around and see everybody.
Well, the same thing is true for me. My first big break came from Gene Lando and Jim Tallman, who were at Evisort, followed immediately by Andrew Seja at Relativity. This is back in 2008. Mm-hmm. And Relativity was not the Relativity that we know today in 2008. And Andrew Seja was the first one that really gave me a break and funded me and said, go do that breakfast series of yours. I think that's a great idea. Go do the breakfast, go do the dinners. And one thing has led to another. And I've been community building and connecting people ever since. So a shout out to those three that helped me get my start as well. Let's do time capsule for 200.
Sure.
If we had a time capsule here and we were going to put 2 predictions into it, a small prediction, a micro prediction, and then a macro prediction, what 2 predictions do you put in there? And you go like, next year at this time, I predict the following.
I think there's going to be a very large amount of consolidation
Yep.
in the space, because if you just look at the posters that are on the booths, I mean, I don't know. Did they all write it with GPT? It all says the same thing, right? So there's a lot of companies here that I think are better together versus as standalone companies. That's one thing. And the
So when
other
you say
thing,
merger, do you think some of the smaller firms will find ways to come together? It's not an acquisition strategy that you're proposing. You're saying, I think there's going to be some mergers of small, like-minded organizations.
I think it can take different forms, right? There's small companies can come together to become a medium-sized company to be more competitive. They can also be acquired by some of the larger organizations. Like, at Evisort, we've also looked at companies that we could acquire
Sure.
to make our portfolio more complete. And so I think it can take a variety of different forms. But the core of it is partnerships matter. Just being a standalone matter management company doesn't matter. And I think that will be the message I share with the Legal Week participants is if you're running one of these sort of smaller point solution based companies, have a relationship with other firms. Right? You don't know, one day you might be helping each other inside of an account.
So it's so great. I appreciate your time so much. Jerry Ting, thank you for joining us live from Legal
Thank
Week.
you.